Hey, you lovely lot, and welcome back to Crime Analyst and the Intelligence Cell. And thank you so much to all of you for subscribing to Crime Analyst YouTube. And if you haven't subscribed yet, then please hit the button and share me with other people. And I also just want to say a big thank you to all of you who've commented, and thank you to all of you for all your recommendations as well. I will be doing the Murdoch murders, the murders of Maggie and Paul. And of course, there are the other investigations, the murder of Stephen Smith and the death of Mallory Beach, and also Gloria Satterfield. So it is a complex and complicated case. It is multi-layered, and I'm going to be sharing with you my analysis and insight. And also do check out Crime Analyst, my podcast as well. Okay, so with that having been said, I am returning to the case of Kaylee Gonzalez, Madison Mogan, Zana Knodel, and Ethan Chapin. And you might know this case. It's been called in the media the Idaho Four. And it's the horrific quadruple murders of the four students after they had come home from being out for the night, and they were murdered in their student accommodation. And it's a case that is really horrific, as are all these cases. But the fact that they came home from being on a night out and then they were targeted and attacked and murdered in their own home, I think everybody feels that sense of real concern about who is the type of person who would do something like this. And immediately when I first started talking about this case and I analysed what happened at the crime scene and at those murders, I said that this was most likely a case of stalking. Now, stalking is a pattern of unwanted, fixated and obsessive behaviour that's intrusive, and it causes alarm and distress and a fear of violence. And oftentimes people don't know they're being stalked until something significant happens and it's a tipping point that's reached, and then they start to look backwards and realise that actually there's some very concerning things that have happened either online or in real life. Now, I say that as somebody who spoke with many victims of stalking and decided that we needed a stalking offence in England and Wales. And that offence of stalking came in 2012. And because I heard from so many victims at the time I was trying to change the law, I set up the world's first national stalking advocacy service for high-risk victims of stalking, because there wasn't anything there to help victims of stalking, to help them get the best advice at the worst time. And it really is alarming when you're being stalked. And the other thing, I've learned so many things from working these cases, and I've worked thousands and thousands of stalking cases. But the other thing I've understood about the stalkers is that most of them, if not all of them, are serial perpetrators. And that's really why I ran the campaign, to ensure that domestic abusers and stalkers, that when they have histories, when they are serial perpetrators, that they should be on the same register as sex offenders, because these are the most dangerous of perpetrators, and they are more likely to escalate to commit serious harm, violence and murder than any other perpetrator. And so it's really important that we understand the risk and the dangerousness when you have a stalker. And I'm talking specifically when there's a domestic violence stalker, when there's been an intimate relationship, but also if they're a predatory stalker, i.e. they're stalking because they perhaps have a sexual motivation, or they're predatory, like in this particular case, where I believe that the individual is a predatory stalker, and that means that there would be a history. And of course, we know that BK was arrested in December and he's been charged and he's awaiting trial. And there's a lot of noise around him. And I don't say his full name because I don't want to give him any more airtime or notoriety. But I do think that the update that came in on April the 20th is an important one. And I did talk to News Nation about their breaking news regarding BK's behaviour. So I'm going to tell you about that behaviour because I think it is very important and it talks to motive. And I know some of you didn't manage to watch that interview that I did with Chris Cuomo's News Nation, but I do think that the update is significant. And that's firstly that he has a history of stalking. So firstly, I said that when it was discovered that an ID of one of the members of the student house was found in BK's possession. And we don't know in which residence it was found of BK's, and we don't know whose ID it was, but there was no reason for him to have that in his possession. And there was further evidence of cyber stalking. Well, now it's come to light that one of the women who knew BK had confided in him that she believed her home had been broken into, and he assisted her putting in a security system. And now law enforcement believe that he may well have been stalking her using that security system. Now, some people might think that that sounds quite far-fetched. What I will tell you is that stalkers are very creative in terms of creating opportunities to be able to stalk their intended target. So firstly, regarding victimology, a particular victim is chosen at a particular time on a particular day for a particular reason. And I believe that's what happened with both here when I'm talking about the Idaho 4 case, but also when I'm talking about this lady who knew BK. And with the Idaho 4 case, I believe that there was a primary victim, and I've talked about that in my previous video on the Idaho 4 case, so please go and watch that. And also, I talked about it on a short, and I really believe that there was a primary target. And if law enforcement are doing everything that they should be, which is requesting all digital data, including social media, bank accounts and social security related information, and they do the computers, the tablets, the smartphones, etc., they will find somewhere in that extensive data and information, they will find the point where BK started to follow, target, watch a particular victim. And it will be one of those four. And like I said, stalkers are very creative, and they're also very devious at creating these opportunities. And oftentimes law enforcement think, oh, it sounds far too fantastical, but it does happen. I've worked on cases where stalkers have been living in the loft or in the basement or in the cavity of walls in a home address. I've worked on cases where the stalker is seemingly the confidant, the person that the victim's the closest to, and they're telling them all these things that are happening to them, and that person turns out to be the stalker. So they really are creative, and they are very devious and manipulative. And what we do know about BK's history, well, one, yes, he was stalking others, and two, that he had a history of being sexist and chauvinistic towards female colleagues. And there were multiple allegations against him at Washington State University. Now, he was there as a criminology graduate assistant, and some of the students, and the women in particular, had complained about him. He would say things like, men would take the jobs of women because women just aren't smart enough. And he would make snide comments to women on the programme. And he also marked the females more harshly than the men. And so there had been multiple complaints about him. And this had been flagged to one of the professors. And he was being spoken to about that. And in fact, there was a harassment training event that was put together at the university. And he received a series of letters about him needing to professionally improve. And I think this is very significant. You see, I would trade the word sexism and chauvinism, and I would say this is about misogyny. BK had a problem with women, and more so, he wanted power over women. And that's why he behaved in this way. And I think it's really important that we understand this misogyny and everyday sexism that can be overlooked because women experience it every day. At times, we don't even know that we're experiencing it. For example, we don't know that our male colleagues receive a higher amount of money. We don't know that our male colleague students are being marked far more generously. We don't know we're being marked down due to our sex, but these sorts of comments that are just blown off as just nuisance behaviour or everyday sexism, the misogyny, they are red flags. And these are red flags that BK had a problem with women and he didn't like women. So when we've got primarily women being targeted in a home address and being stabbed and brutally killed, this starts to make more sense and it talks to motive. I don't know the exact sequence of events, but I would imagine that things started to escalate and come to a head because what we do know is that BK was actually terminated from the programme in December. But like I said, there'd be a series of steps that happen before that termination. And what I do know is that there was an improvement plan that was put into place and that there was a meeting on November the 2nd where they were going to discuss this improvement plan. And thereafter, there was a big altercation. Now, probably if you put that timeline together and whatever else was going on in BK's life, in terms of maybe him stalking another woman or another woman being treated very badly, but I would say it's probably about stalking, that there was some kind of challenge, that pressure and that accountability was what created this escalation and this tipping point. So that on November the 13th, when he went out, he had a target in mind and he wanted to go out and harm that particular target. And let's not forget, he had this kill kit on him. His phone pinged in the area and that the car was seen driving around multiple times and his phone went dark across the time that the students were attacked and killed. So that's very significant, along with the fact that there was DNA that was found on the sheath of the knife. And when you start to build all these things together, the circumstantial evidence starts to become very significant. And yes, the forensic evidence is there too. The phone and the cell towers pinging, the footprint, the phone going dark, the car being seen, all of these things start to become very significant. And the sexism, the misogyny, the fact that BK wanted power over women, that is very significant in my view. And I say it all the time, but these are red flags to serious harm and violence and to femicide. And we have to start to take them seriously. Here was an individual who thought he was very smart. We would call it sublimation in psychological terms, that he was doing a criminology degree. So he was working in an area, I believe it's sublimation, because he had unacceptable impulses. And he was using the criminology degree and being in that environment to hide his unacceptable behavior and actions. But the thing is, it kept leaking out. And that's why I said on the News Nation interview that there will be other women. There will be women that will now say that he made them feel very uncomfortable. And they should come forward and they should report those things. And too often when women do report it, it's seen as something that's low level and nuisance behaviour. But these are very significant behaviours, in my opinion. So his male entitlement, that's another really important thing for us to think about. His level of male entitlement, the fact that he has male privilege and the fact that he believes he's very intelligent, well, his behaviour was leaking out left and right. In fact, even in a local brewery that he would go to, the women there were made to feel very uncomfortable by him. So much so that they flagged his ID because they were uncomfortable. So these are the sorts of behaviours that I talked about on News Nation, that they would be tip of the iceberg. There would be many other women that he had come into contact with. And some might say it was chauvinistic or sexist in the way that he behaves. But I want people to use the term misogyny, because we have to name it and we have to call it out. It's much more than sexism. It's about a hatred. It's about a vibration where someone feels that they have to have power over and that they will act on impulses to have power over people. So somebody going into a home address where there were 6 students in there, he must have felt emboldened to go in there. He might have well felt that he could get away with it, but I believe that he felt that the reward of doing this far outweighed the risk to him, that perhaps he had only one night and he wanted to go in then because the target wouldn't be there any other time. And therefore he decided to act out that fantasy and those impulses. So it really is a truly horrific case. I think we're going to be learning far more about his behaviour. And this really is about a case where you have to join the dots and where it's really important for the circumstantial evidence to be put before the court and for experts to talk about that behaviour as well. The attitude to action, because it's on a continuum. So someone doesn't just wake up in their second or third or fourth decade of life and start to behave in this way. It would have been seen all across his interpersonal interactions. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. It is a significant update. We do have to do more to understand stalking and how we better support victims. And that's where Paladin, the National Stalking Advocacy Service that I founded, comes in. And in the UK, it's National Stalking Awareness Week. So that's important too, raising awareness. So that's why I also wanted to talk about this case. And unfortunately, I'm sure we're going to be hearing far more. Now, the next court date is June 26th, so I will continue to follow the case and share updates with you. So I'm going to keep it short and sweet and end there. And I'll end by sharing my golden rules: be curious, ask questions, and always trust your instincts.